Firstly, mate, thank you for actually speaking with me. It's very difficult to find people to talk to in Israel who have served, and especially in a lot of the units you're a part of. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So do you mind, I guess, introducing yourself, I guess your background and credentials within the Israeli Defence Force as well?
So the short version is, I got recruited back in 2003. My unit was the Gaza unit. We fought to create stability for the Jewish communities within the Gaza Strip at the time. And we were in there until 2005, till the pullout. And ever since then, I've been bouncing around in different units, different outfits in my reserve duty, and eventually ending up here where I'm at today, part of the Paratrooper battalion, and which is kind of funny because my guys used to make fun of the Paratroopers and they make fun of us, and there's all that background. But really, at the bottom line, we're all brothers in arms. We're all here to do our job professionally, and in particular, my outfit and group of guys, we're a small team who are comprised of very varied Special Forces background. Myself not included, by the way. That's not my background as in the Special Forces community, but I found myself in the Special Forces community in my reserve duty. And so it's a huge honor for me that the guys would even let me be part of the team. And that's what I do today is help with the war effort right now in Gaza. As you can tell, where we're standing right now is literally a few clicks from the actual border. And if the audio picks it up, we got artillery shells in the background, tanks, Apache right now, and Air Force, and you name it. And so that's where we're at right now. We're right in the very right on the entry point to Gaza.
Yeah. And so, what is the primary role of, I guess, who you're training and what you're involved with currently?
Our main role is to assist in the efforts of the Paratrooper battalion that's basically taking part in the Gaza operations. So also, we're actually the first ones that were called up on the day of the attack. Was it 25 days ago now? The 7th of October, Black Sabbath. I woke up to my house shaking, and I live just outside the Jerusalem hills. My house was shaking. My wife woke me up. She's like, the house is shaking. Something's, out of the norm. And I'm like, okay, you're trying to wake up. You're all groggy. And so I said, I'll go ahead and check my group text for my unit. And sure enough, it was blown out of, tons of messages. And I realized, okay, something seriously just happened. I don't know what. So after a few minutes of trying to get my bearings and understand what in the world happened, I understood very quickly that we had come under a very vicious and horrible attack. Over 2,000 terrorists infiltrated from Gaza into the southern communities, one of which is where we're standing right now, that are right on the border to the Gaza Strip. They infiltrated, they went on a killing spree, raping, murdering, doing horrible things. And so I put all my gear together, still under rocket barrage. The red alert was blaring. My family was hiding in the bomb shelter, and I said goodbye, and I left and didn't turn back. And so most of the guys in my outfit, like I said, we're from day one, from the first morning, non-stop, gearing up, fighting, training, just trying to basically get ourselves ready for our main objectives, because some of the main objectives that we're going to be taking part in have not been done yet. But we have taken part in some very significant and important missions. I can't give details about that, but it's along the southern border here, along the Gaza Strip, and trying to restore peace and security for our civilians that got Yeah, infiltrated. And the best example I've given in some of the interviews is, for anybody who's watched films, is the Red Dawn film. So Red Dawn is like the worst case scenario. United States comes under attack by, was it Russian forces and like North Korean or something, and they just parachute in by droves into, you know, suburbia and start butchering people, right? And then putting them in concentration camps and all this horrible stuff, which didn't happen in that case for us. Yes, they parachuted in some cases, they infiltrated with motorbikes or other transportation, and then just went on a killing spree. And then kidnapping, and if you will, concentration camp back into Gaza, over 200 civilians. So that's the reality we woke up to. Again, close to 2,000 Israelis murdered. Right now the number is 1,600 if I'm not mistaken, but I believe, unfortunately, we'll discover once this is all over, because we haven't found every body. We haven't been able to retrieve every person that's missing. So the numbers are a little bit higher. It really doesn't matter. The point is, hundreds of people lost their lives in the most brutal, horrible ways. And then there's fathers that are here, like myself, whose families we had to leave at zero notice. And with the concern of, what if they're going to come to my community? My family doesn't have a way to defend themselves. I'm the sole defender in my family, the sole one who's armed, trained. So you can imagine, like a lot of guys like myself found themselves in a very, very dark place, and for a very long time, a long drawn battle, because it's not this in and out operations. We're now at 25 days. Thankfully, we have been able to see our families just briefly for a few hours. Some of us got a very short leave, and so we're thankful for that. But other than that, that's the reality we have found ourselves in, and it's pretty insane.
And on the ground,
yeah,
the initial clearing back through of the Israeli Defence Force, back through those communities.
Yes.
How was that on the ground for the guys who were there? And what sort of casualty figures were they taking? Because we know that's immense urban street warfare, and that this was set up, like this, from Hamas.
Right.
It wasn't a one-off, just go in, whatever. They had tactics, they obviously had planned this, thousands of rockets, everything.
Correct.
How did that look for the guys who first stepped back into those communities, and what sort of shock did they actually have?
So I have multiple friends who have engaged with the terrorists. I have friends who are first responders, or if you will, armed civilians of the Jewish communities along the Gaza border. We have security teams, and so I label those as first responders, right? So those men were the ones who were more trained and prepared and had the gear and so on. They annihilated the terrorists, okay? Because the terrorists, with all due respect, and we do respect our enemy, and they were well planned, well prepared, and what have you, they were gunning for civilians. And when they found themselves encountering an armed response, we found that they got chopped down very quickly. And thankfully for us, because otherwise the damage would have been way worse. So I have very good friends that, like I said, have engaged with those terrorists. I have very good friends who are in the different special forces community, Yamam, for one. I have friends in the Matkal, friends in, all the special forces branches. And many of them incurred some pretty heavy losses. And I would say the highest number of losses in a conflict and in an operation in the whole history of Israel's wars. Okay, so a good way to get perspective is Operation Red Wings, where you had 4 SEALs. They went on a recon mission. They found themselves in a very serious scenario with terrorists coming from everywhere to kill them. And then they sent in I think it's called Chinook, the double propeller. Sent in a Chinook full of special forces guys to help extract their friends, and that got hit by an RPG. And so that was the heaviest loss of naval men in the history of the Navy, right? So, and that was just a drop in the bucket to what we lost. And especially if you're going to make it comparatively to the number of civilians we have and the number of operators that we have in comparison to the number of operators you have in the United States military. So to quantify that, I can't even, my mind can't even wrap around the insanity of how many lives have been lost, both civilian, but not to mention the first responders, the special forces groups that were the first one to engage with, again, thousands of terrorists, okay? One of my buddies pointed out and said it's basically like a turkey shoot. He didn't say that, but I'm paraphrasing it in a term you guys can understand, because it's like they're everywhere, and they're just like, bop, 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 there's another, bop, bop, you know, there's another one, there's another one. You know, it's like you're swarmed with terrorists from every direction, coming out of tunnels, parachuting in, you name it. Another example, again, from firsthand people I've spoken to, they had a checkpoint. The terrorists had a legit, like a military setup checkpoint on the main road that they were traveling to go get to the civilians that were being butchered. And so they waved them down, and thankfully this is one of the most qualified unit in all of our special forces community. And so these guys weren't a bunch of idiots, you know, they're seasoned warriors. So they could tell that there's something wrong. So a few hundred meters away, they're looking at these guys, they're going, something's fishy about this. It doesn't look like IDF.
It's important to note in that checkpoint, they're also wearing IDF uniforms.
Wearing IDF uniforms, they were playing like it's a normal deal. And so until these guys, literally, they stopped their vehicle and they went, nah, there's something wrong. And right as they had that gut check and their experience combined, the guy pulls out his AK-47 and starts riddling the car with bullets. And by miracle, not one of those guys got killed or maybe wounded, I can't remember. But then they, of course, eliminated that threat and then continued on to the civilian towns that were, that were being slaughtered. And so I'll put it like this: if you're in a SWAT team, if you're in a special forces group, SEAL Team 6, Delta, any of these Tier 1 operators that know anything about hostage rescue, they're the best in the world in that. And we have the best of the world here in Israel in that. And every one of those units were called up for hostage rescue. The problem is, and you can verify this with any of those communities, these men found themselves in the worst case scenario where the hostage takers, right, the terrorists, they didn't want anything. They just were going on a killing spree. So if the units that were called up to try to rescue the hostages, if they operated by the book, the hostages are dead within minutes. So in other words, they had to go in guns blazing. They had to put all of their tactics aside, all of their operational MO, and be like, okay, guys, we're just going in. We got to, because they could hear the screams, they could hear the gunfire. I mean, they were unloading ammo on civilians, unloading immense rounds on these civilians. And so that's the hell that we found ourselves in. And one of the gun battles, for example, what happened not too far from here, another example, was the police station in Sderot. I know the police station very well because part of what I do in my day-to-day job, besides executive protection, is I try to help with Israel diplomacy. I use my English. As you can tell, I don't talk like an Israeli and horrible accent, and you can't understand what I'm saying. And I really did my best to try to understand the West, understand how the West gets communicated to, take those skills and use social media, YouTube and Facebook and whatever, to try to explain to the world the reality of the Southern communities, which I have kind of adopted in a way to try to represent them. So I know a lot of the first responders here. They're good friends of mine. And thank God most of them are alive. And so what I would do is I would take groups, take diplomatic groups from Scandinavian countries and European countries and whatnot, and show them the reality of the civilians living along the Gaza Strip, the unending amounts of mortar fire and makeshift Qassam rockets and whatnot that are being fired into these communities, and then would take them to the police station where they would have hundreds of these rockets kind of showcased, that you could show people and say, this is what we're talking about. Like, do you understand? This is what these civilians are under a monthly or weekly, or depending where they're at, routine of these rockets being fired at them. So the terrorists took over that police station. They butchered all the policemen that were there. And by the way, the policemen also killed a lot of the terrorists. But unfortunately, like I said, it was such an immense number of terrorists that infiltrated that they overpowered the policemen eventually, except for one woman. The one woman police officer, she by miracle survived that horror, bloodbath, and she was actually on the top of the police station, on the roof. And good friends of ours from the Yamam, our special SWAT unit, were able to access her eventually. Again, like I said, a very heavy gunfire that lasted for 25 hours. 25 hours. And so eventually they could get to her, get her out, and she's the lone survivor of that whole police station that came under attack. And eventually, they had to use some very, very unusual tactics, I would say. A tank to literally bombard the police station in a civilian populated area with a bunch of, homes that are, in multi-story complexes. And you can imagine the neighbors are like, what in the world's happening? Yeah. And anybody who knows and has ever been near a tank firing, it'll make you pee your pants. Not to mention, of course, if you're just a total civilian, you're like, what in the world's happening? But that's the extremity that our tacticians needed to go to in order to eliminate the threat, because they knew none of the officers are alive except for the one woman. We got her out, level the place. And so today, if I'm going to take you there, and I haven't seen it actually, I've only seen pictures from my friends that have been there, but if you go there today, the whole police station is leveled. It's gone. That's a crazy reality for me, because I've done hundreds of tours and brought people and showed them and what have you, and it's like, oh my God, that's our reality.
And how many operators of a figure did Israel actually lose on that day?
I can't give exact numbers because, again, unless it's officially publicized, and plus, I haven't been looking at the news, so I don't know the figures that have been publicized. Yeah. I know the official number. I can't give that out unless it's been reported by our news. But I will tell you this: it was heavy casualties, unfortunately. In that particular operation, I know one of our operators was unfortunately killed in that gun battle, the 25 hours gun battle for the police station.
And what do you make of the response that we're hearing? The response, constant.
Yeah.
We're hearing the artillery guns around us. We're then hearing the artillery splash on the other end. We're hearing the Apaches, hearing the jets, whatever. The international community around the world, I think, on the first 24 hours, 48, 72 hours of this, was very like, this is horrible what has happened. But
Correct.
In the 3 weeks since, there's been a big shift in.
Correct.
There's been thousands, if not tens of thousands of tons of munitions leveling Gaza.
Yep.
What do you make of that and people's criticisms of that? Because we see this footage online of children and civilians being pulled out of areas, and we know that Hamas is amongst the civilian community there as well, and
Correct.
use that as a tactic. But what do you make of Israel's response to that, because many people will say it is significantly more than is needed because of the amount of casualties, the thousands on that side, as well as the children.
I'll put it real simply. War is hell. Civilians, unfortunately, are going to get hurt no matter what you do. Now, quantify that with Hamas, ISIS, and all these other terrorist alphabet soup that take those civilians and purposely put them in the line of fire. They put them in the storage caches of rockets and explosives and so on. They put them they put the rocket launchers in mosques, hospitals, schools. They play very, very, extremely, very dirty. And the world doesn't understand this because the world's not here. You're not here. You're not fighting this war. You don't know a clue what you're talking about. Here's my deal. The military, our military, is the most moral military in the world, par none. How do I know this? I have friends in all the special forces community and regular, Army, Marines, you name it, okay? Navy. So I know people from a very broad military background through my years of traveling and speaking about Israel and what have you. And usually people from a military background can connect with what I'm trying to tell, a civilian audience, and they'll usually approach me and we'll chat and we'll talk and we'll swap stories. And what I've learned from the broad variety, like I said, of people that I've met, European military, Scandinavian military, United States, Australia, England, every one of them all agree that the way we operate is the most insane, and to the extent that we're actually endangering our men and our civilians in the way we operate. So they're the ones who are telling me we would never do that. And that's how I know that our military operates in the most highest moral standard. Besides that, the military is actually under the rabbinic moral code of operating, which is extremely high. And so many soldiers who do not share any religious ideas basically kind of frown upon that, and they have some issue with that because they're like, hey, I'm not religious and I really don't care what the rabbi says, right? But yet still we will operate under that very extreme code of morality, because at the end of the day, that's what the government has decided, that's what the military has decided, and that's how we operate. And the way we operate is to eliminate the terrorists and to incur zero collateral damage, like the world likes to use, the European and North American countries, they use the word collateral damage. For me, that means human lives, okay? It's not something abstract, okay? So for us, the loss of any human life, Palestinian, Muslim, Christian, it really doesn't matter. We don't look at culture or ethnicity or religion or all of that. We look at human beings. And our goal is to eliminate the terrorists and to not incur any damage on civilian population, period. And that goes across the board, all the military. So if people have an issue with the way we're operating, well, then you have an issue with your country, because your country does not hold that moral standard that we have. So if you think we're bad, then you better go and start petitioning against United States war crimes in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and the same for Australia, the same for England, the same for Sweden, the same for Norway. You guys better start pointing the finger at yourselves first before you point the fingers at us. That's all I got to say about that issue, because to be honest, I take it very personal when I get accused of being a baby killer and all this crap. None of my boys have killed any babies. None of them. And trust me, we have plenty of kills in my unit, combined. So, good luck with those accusations.
Yeah, and the media, being the media, it's a short-term lifespan, and it will roll over very quickly. And we've seen all around the world these Free Palestine rallies that have gone to the extreme. If you're seeing Taliban flags, you're seeing ISIS flags, you're seeing things like this. What do you feel, as someone who's in Israel, in the Defence Force, seeing that in a country like Australia, and you and I were talking offline about in front of the Sydney Opera House, Australia's most iconic thing. We're hearing people say, "That's the Jews." We're seeing in the UK, we're seeing Al-Qaeda, Taliban flags. What do you make of when you see that? Where have these people, where have they gone off the path of what is, I guess, moral and normal?
I'll put it this way. I've been speaking for many years about the rise of anti-Semitism. I've been traveling in many, mostly Christian churches, evangelical Protestant churches typically, that will invite me to speak. And I've tried to raise the awareness that anti-Semitism is in an extreme high globally. And the bottom line is the world hates Jews. It's that simple. The world, and I'm not saying everybody in the world, like don't take my words out of context here, but what I'm saying is on a global scale, there's a huge number, a very large number of individuals who simply do not like Jews. It's that simple. It's anti-Semitism at its core, because no other country, no other people group have gotten this type of double standard or criticism in anything, in any conflict, and what have you. And so, to me, if you want to free Palestine, which, by the way, that's what I'm trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to free the Palestinians from Hamas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and all of these terrorist scumbags that are holding the Gazans captive with fear and torture. If, you know, the things that they do to each other there is unmentionable. Besides the fact what they did to us, but they do that. People live in this hell yearly, round the year, and nobody says a word about how the tortures and the horrible crimes that Hamas is committing against their own people, or the PLO, or any of those terrorist entities in Samaria and so on. And so, you want to free Palestine? Support Israel's operations in eliminating the terrorist infrastructure in the Gaza Strip and in Judea and Samaria, where we have way too many terrorist hotbeds that are just making life miserable for both Palestinians and for the Jewish community. And by the way, Israel is not Jewish only. We have 20% Muslims that are Israelis. So when these rockets are being fired into Israel, they are targeting the 20% of the Muslim population of Israel. They are targeting the roughly 10% Christian population of Israel. Nobody talks about those people, do they? We're talking about the Circassians, okay, who is a minority ethnic group who lives in the north of Israel. They're being targeted. And they didn't ask for this. You're targeting Druze, minority ethnic group in the land of Israel. You're targeting Bedouins, northern Bedouins and southern Bedouins, okay? And they're Muslim. Most of them are Sunni. So when you're targeting Israel, and when Hamas is targeting Israel with rockets, and they're just firing, broadly, because it's not, it's not pinpoint missiles, they're targeting all of those populations. But the only ones that are getting criticized are the Jews, and the only ones that are being singled out in these Free Palestine protests are my population, the majority which happen to be Jewish. Because guess what? Yes, this is the Jewish homeland. And yes, we're back in our homeland that spans over nearly 4,000 years. If the world has a problem with that, then you have a problem with your own humanity. You have a own problem with your own history, because every people group has been displaced by another people group, by another ethnicity, and that's most of Europe, okay? That's most of North America. That's most of South America. That's most of Africa. And I don't hear anybody crying about the war crimes happening anywhere else in the world but here. And it's, again, the only thing I can understand from this is it's anti-Semitism. And it's exactly what we saw in World War II. It's exact same singling out of the Jew, which has been happening all over, like I said, in Europe and North America, and the anti-Semitism that's rising in very, very evil ways, showing its face. And so really what you need to do is point your finger at yourself and your hypocrisy, because I don't need to give you an excuse for what I'm doing. I am defending my homeland. I'm defending my citizens who have been brutally murdered, and I will do whatever it takes to defend them and to restore peace, both for myself and for the Palestinians living on the other side of this border here.
And when you and your boys roll on the ground, how high of a priority is it to protect the civilians, and what challenges are you facing once you actually land in the AO?
It's very high priority, because again, if I go back to boot camp, that's where they gave us the 10 rules of engagement. It's called the purity of the weapon. 10 rules. There's 10 rules that we're taught, like the 10 commandments, because essentially as a war fighter, as someone who is an armed soldier, what we're taught before we get our weapon is the weapon is not to be used, for example, open the door, let me in, okay? I'm not threatening you and saying, give me this, do that, right? We talk with our gun down. Unless you pose a threat, I don't bring this up and point it at you, right? So talking about morality, is our desire to minimize any human casualties? It's extremely high. It's ridiculously high. And like I said, there's no other military in the world, before they're getting given a weapon, do they have to memorize 10 gun purity laws. The weapon may never be used to exercise force. Only if you find yourself under attack and threat, and to yourself and to others around you, only then can you engage, etc., etc., etc. Like I said, our moral conduct is the highest there is in the world. And again, if people are concerned about the civilians in Gaza, you should be concerned about Hamas, who are using the Gazans as human shields, who are hiding them in harm's way, who are putting them right by the rocket launchers. Now, when I say right by, they're not standing there in the open, underground, hidden, concealed from the Air Force. So the Air Force, who is engaging with these rocket launch pads, do not know that there's civilians there. Just to be clear, it doesn't mean, oh, there's a launching pad, and here's a bunch of civilians. Oh, shoot it, it's okay. No. If we see one human, one civilian, okay, man, woman, child, doesn't matter. And you guys can check me on this. There's plenty of footage that's been released from the Air Force operations where the pilot he's engaged, he's ready, his guns are hot, ready to go, and then last moment, nope, I see a civilian, I'm calling, and they get the right to say, nope, I'm pulling out. They don't need the general to tell them, no, it's okay, kill him, it's fine. That's a moral standard that nobody has in the world. Hamas knows it very well. Our enemies know this very well, and they use our morality against us. And they know that for me as a soldier, the thought that I killed an innocent person is beyond acceptable. And they use that against us because they are bloodthirsty animals. And in fact, I'm sorry to even to defame animals, because animals have a higher moral standard than the Hamas do, from what we saw on that Black Sabbath. So no, they're not even animals. They're unhuman. The things that they've done and the way they think and the way they brainwash people to think, it's otherworldly. It's not human.
Do you fear, though, from this constant bombardment campaign against Gaza, that there could be further radicalisation of people there. Like if I was a 15-year-old boy there, and
Sure.
you know, I've been living there my whole life. That's my optics of the world.
Yeah.
And then I see our neighbours dropping 10,000 tons of bombs here, and you know, sadly killing thousands of civilians and thousands of children.
Sure.
What is the fear there of further radicalisation and a whole new generation then of Islamic Jihad terrorists?
Yeah, that's definitely a concern for us, because unfortunately, any retaliation that we do, any operations that we conduct, no matter how moral, how righteous, what have you, civilians are going to get hurt, unfortunately. Like I said, they booby trap buildings, they booby trap civilians, they, you know, because they know that the minute that that Israel and the IDF, once we go in and we operate, they want us to look bad, both in the media, but also to themselves. They want the populace to think, I'm the bad guy, I'm the one that caused your son, your daughter, your wife, your mother, your grandma, what have you, to have been murdered now in a horrible way through, typically it's booby traps with explosives and what have you. And so, yes, unfortunately, we're aware of the fact that people will most likely get radicalized from that. They're going to picture me as the enemy no matter what I do. And there's literally nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can do about that. The only ones who have the ability to turn that evil cycle around is their parents, it's their elders, it's whoever is able to educate them different. And until the Palestinians teach their children, or until they love their children more than they hate us, it's an evil cycle that's not going to end. There's nothing I can do about that. That's out of my realm of possibility. And not just me, Israel, the government, whoever. There's nothing we can do about that. There's nothing the United Nations can do about it. There's nothing the European Union can do about it. You can pour money on them. They're just going to use it to fire more rockets. I mean, just listen to all the booms that we've been hearing in the background since we started this interview. It's not just artillery, it's also the Iron Dome knocking out a bunch of the rockets that are being fired in. I mean, you saw it just a minute ago, right? So, what can I do with that?
And on the ground, you know, as we've seen in the past couple of days, we have seen Israel, you know, make a move into Gaza.
Yeah.
How is that looking on the ground? What are you hearing, seeing from the front line that's happening there? That, you know, that we're not getting that many. We've got maybe 10 photos come out and some drips and drabs of stories. What's it actually looking like on the ground for the guys rolling in?
So for the units that are in there, again, I cannot give enough information at all. I mean, it's lame, but what I can tell you is that our operations are very successful. I can tell you that we have already taken out many terrorists, and unfortunately at the same time we've incurred some heavy losses as well. But all in all, some outfits are doing better than others. It's just the way war goes. All in all, we're being very successful in our ground operations. And like I said, our goal is to eliminate the terrorist threats. Our goal is to restore peace to the southern communities here that have been living in hell. I mean, just imagine waking up and going to sleep to this sound in the background. This is not a reality for anybody, not the Palestinians and not for us. So, like I said, our goal and our objective that has been given to us is to eliminate and literally chop off the head of this snake, which is known as Hamas. It's also ISIS, it's also Al-Qaeda, it's also a bunch of alphabet soup. And I really don't care about your little banners. You all share the same evil. And that evil is hatred towards Israel, disregard for your people, and to destroy Israel at every cost, including your very own people. And that threat needs to be eliminated, and that's what we're trying to do. And I believe by the time our operations are done, who knows when that's going to be, we're going to do that. And then again, it really depends on the government's decisions as further, how are we going to handle now Gaza? Is it going to remain as we've known it before? Is the military going to have a presence in there like it was in back pre-2005? I don't know. My hopes are that the security cabinet makes some very wise choices on how we're going to put an end to the threat of rocket fire coming out of this place.
And how has your training, I guess, changed since the beginning of this? You were telling me offline about the retrieval of casualties under fire and how that's moving, similar to, I guess, people will be familiar more with PJs in the US, as well as we know the tunnel warfare that is and will continue to take place within Gaza. Can you tell us about, I guess, that retrieval of casualties as well as then the training specifics in that, to what you can at least?
Sure. Well, for one, I'll point this out. We have been preparing for a very long time, at least in my battalion, for a multi-front war. So there's no big shocker there. We were all prepared for that. We were trained for that. A multi-front meaning the Gaza Strip, meaning Lebanon via Hezbollah there, which, by the way, have destroyed a whole country. Lebanon used to be a gem in the Middle East. Some of the wealthiest Arabs lived in Lebanon, and either one of us could have gone over there and enjoyed the fine dining, the nightlife, you name it. It was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful country. Today, it's a hellhole. Today, people can barely afford gas, okay? That's what these guys have done. And so those same entities, like I said, because they hate us more than they care about their own people, have now decided to join in the fight and attack us in the north. Syria, I understand, is doing something. Yemen is now threatening to join in the battle. Basically, all of our enemies are basically wanting a piece of us. And I can tell you that the military is trained, prepared, and for every scenario. Again, we're not perfect, we're not invincible, but we're doing our best. And I can tell you that our training has gotten way, way, way better, meaning the honing in of our skills and now our capabilities are much better than what it was a year ago and what it was 2 years ago and so on. And that's because the ones who foresaw a horrible scenario, not to this scale, but foresaw that we would be in a similar scenario that we find ourselves right now, they have done their best to train us. And my unit in particular has done our best to train the next generation to do our job. And what we've, collectively have gathered throughout the years within my outfit. So yeah, that's what I can tell you. And by the way, praise God, today we have some good news. We were able to retrieve one of the hostages who happened to be one of the soldiers, a soldier girl, and through a very complex operation, and take our hat off to, again, Yamam, who have really shined very brightly during a lot of this hell. They were, plus a few other units, but essentially they're the ones that were highlighted. And I know that the media talked about them, so I can share that it was them in particular that were involved in this hostage rescue. And so we have one other person that has been retrieved. And so praise God, there's a family that's rejoicing, but unfortunately, for every hostage that's going to be restored to us, if at all, it's not smooth sailing. Okay, what did they do to her? Did they torture her? Did they rape her? God knows what she saw. People butchered near her, etc., what have you. These people are, like I said, they're not even animals. And so unfortunately now, it's both the joy, but also the horror of how do we work through getting back to normal life, so to speak.
Mate, thank you very much for speaking openly and candidly with me. Is there anything else you'd like to share that you think we may have missed that people may find interesting from a military's perspective or any perspective?
I think we covered a lot of ground.
We did. Well, mate, I wish you all the best and all the safety. So thank you very much. And I know my audience will really appreciate how you've been with this as well, and I guess your humanity as a warrior too.
Thank you.
Easy, thank you.